Welcome CSC103. It's spring 2021, and this exercise is an extra credit exercise for this semester. Sometimes it's a regular assignment, and it has been in the past, but there are some changes to it from the last time we did it. So this will be extra credit for spring 2021, possibly a regular assignment in the future, but this is the sample version, and this is the vanilla version that you're looking at right now because it has a white background and just black generic fonts, default fonts, looks like Times New Roman, and that's about it. You could certainly put more colors in the background and change these fonts. All that stuff we can do with Google Fonts and all that kind of stuff. And it's not hard to do, but let's get this thing working first. And this is what's going to happen. We're going to have a button that's going to show character. And it's just like the Show Patrick one, where we would show Patrick and hide Patrick, except in this case, instead of just showing Patrick, we're showing a character. Now that's Larry Lobster, and we can reset and show another character, or we could just keep showing characters, and it's showing a random one. So sometimes it will repeat, sometimes it could repeat 3 in a row, sometimes you won't see somebody for a while, but what's showing up here is a character, and we might want to put a little space between the buttons and the image. But there's the character, and then there's the name, and the name is kind of a color that kind of matches the character. So Spongebob has kind of gold type, and it has its name. In case you didn't know who these characters were, you get to see who they are. So that's all that happens. It's similar to what we did for Show Patrick, except the code is a little more complex because we're going to use a random number function in JavaScript to generate a random number and then pull one of these characters from a list. So that's what's going to happen. So the basics of what you're seeing here is just showing a random character with its name, and we also have a function that's running off a button, an event that's going to be on the button, so you can reset it. And basically that's just going to make that go away, and it's going to make that go away. It'll make that be blank and that be blank. So these are just HTML parts of the page, and they're blank to start, and then they show up. So that's what we're going to do, and let me just show you some of the code here before we get started. We'll do this from scratch. It shouldn't be that bad, but there's a lot of JavaScript here, and let's just look at the HTML. That's real basic. I'm not really going to go over it, but there's just a headline, a paragraph, there's a button, and then a second button. And that's kind of, we'll do that last. We'll add the reset button last. And then there's 2 divs. Now a div is just an area. Well, there's actually one div. One div is where the image is going to be. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put in some code. Here's the code down here, actually. We're going to put an image tag in there to insert the image. So there's not images already there that are transparent that we're going to make solid. There's going to be nothing there, and we're going to plug in the code. So just like text, we're going to plug in HTML code that's going to actually show the image. Otherwise, there's nothing there. It's just an empty div tag. A div is just a kind of a sectional tag with nothing in it until we put things in it. And we usually give it a name so we could identify it. And there's also an h2 tag with an ID name, so we can target that ID with JavaScript and put a name in there, and then we can also color it. So we're going to do all that. So this is real basic HTML here. CSS, we don't have a lot right now, just adjusting the size of the image so they're not real big. And here's the JavaScript. Now there's a lot of JavaScript. Now what we have first is we have variables set up that represent, the variable name is Spongebob, and that represents this whole URL in quotes. So it's kind of text, but it's really a URL. So it's HTML code is what we're going to be putting in there. And it's actually where Spongebob is online. I have it online inside my GitHub site. So it's going to link to that and put it in there because we can't upload images into CodePen, but that's where it is. And they're all the same except for the name of the character: Spongebob Ping, Patrick Ping, Squidward Ping, Sandy Krabs, and Larry Ping. So once we put 1 in there, it's a lot of code here, but once we put 1, it'll be easy to copy and paste it. And the reason we're doing that is we're making a variable so we can put these all in a list. Now picture if we put these in a list with commas in between, that would be a lot of punctuation, it would be very confusing. So we're just going to use these variable names and put them in a list, and that means these variable names are going to be in here. So when we basically use that, it's going to pull the URL and plug it in there in the page. That's what's going to happen. But we're also going to have a list of colors, so we could put colors down there, and then we're also going to have a list of names, so we could put the names down there, and so we could just use one random number. So when it pulls a random number, if it pulled 0, now remember in computers, numbers start with 0, so we're going to have random numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember that for the future. So this will be random number 0. And if it's Spongebob, it's going to put his URL in there of the image. And then it's going to use the gold color. And it's going to use SpongeBob SquarePants. So these are all in the same order. The URL, the color, or the associated color with the character, and then also the name of the character, which is the full name. So the names are in quotes because they're strings. They're just text. The colors are in quotes because they're just text. Really, they're going to show up in JavaScript as a string. Now you can also put hex in there if you want, which we may do. We may get them from assets and put that in there. That might be easier. Although these names of colors you can just get online and use them. They're standard color names that will substitute for using hex or RGB or anything like that. And notice that just like in a Python list, we use brackets here, except we say var. We use a var keyword and then give it a name. And then it's var keyword and then it's called colors, and var keyword, and the list is called names. And then we're going to pull an item from that list, and I'll show you how to do that. Now this is the reset, which we'll talk about later when we do the reset. And this is the main function to show the character. Now we're going to generate a random number, and then we're going to change all these things. We're going to change the pick, we're going to change the name, we're going to change the color of the name, and then also the opacity is going to go up to 1, and that's only necessary later on when we do a reset. Because when we do a reset, it's going to put whatever the last one is up to 0. So this is just a way to make sure if that happened to be the last one and its opacity is 0, we'll make sure we turn it on again. It's like kind of, you know, the lights get turned off when we hit reset, and this will turn the light on of the image. That's what's kind of happening there. So that's what's happening with the reset function. See, it turns the opacity down to anyone down to 0. So, but that's at the end. We'll just worry about getting the random images first. If you get there, that's good. So we're going to start this from scratch. So I'll see how much I can remember. It's been a while since I did this one. And I do have the notes up here, so we can kind of follow this a little bit. And you can even copy stuff from here. You just have to be careful. If you're going to copy a URL, sometimes with PDFs, it wants to click on the URL. So you got to kind of, you know, watch where you highlight from. You know, maybe if you start there and get that, it'll copy the 1, so you got to delete it, but you just got to be careful with this. And I may put it somewhere else, but I think we'll just have to do 1 and then just change the name. So if you just know we're going in order of Spongebob, the main character, then Patrick, the co-star, and then Squidward, Sandy, kind of in order of how they appear on the page. Larry should be in bold there. Well, it doesn't matter if he's in bold or not, but for the notes' sake, I'll make sure I put it in bold. And one thing you have to watch, I'll show you this line here, is that the whole tag is in quotes. So the entire tag that we're doing, starting with the less than sign, the greater than sign, is in double quotes. But because there's a source attribute in here, we have to use quotes again. So we're using a single quote. So when you have double quotes surrounding everything, you have to switch the quotes. So we'll use single quotes for the URL. And you could swap them. I mean, you could use single quotes on the outside and double quotes in here, whatever you want. But that's what we're going to try to do. And these all have quotes down here for strings. These do not have quotes, remember, because they are variables. So let's get started and let's see how we do with this. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard and I'm going to make a new pen. And you could do that right with your profile here. You could just go to your user menu and just create a new pen. I think there's other places to create new pens as well. I think you could just go here to pen. Will that do it? That'll do it too, even though it doesn't say new pen. So we're going to make a new pen, and you can click on the pen here and just call it, let's see what it says, 17EC random SB for Spongebob. So we're just going to go here, and I have to click again, and we'll call it 17EC is for extra credit, and then I'll just put dash, and I'll put random, and you could put your dash last name first initial if you want. So I'll do that now because I'm working on it. But this is the one I'm doing for the video. Maybe I'll put a V just so I know I'm recording the video. And then I'll just hit enter, and now it's saved. Now there's nothing showing up right now. We're going to do the HTML first. That's going to be fairly easy, I think. Now it says to do this whole Emmet thing here. Now we're doing a body, an H1, a P, and it's kind of cool stuff here. You might even be able to copy this. Actually, if you copy this in here, let's see if we could do this. What it's doing is it's copying code that's going to do the body. Instead of just doing one thing at a time, you could put all this stuff in here. So let's see if this works, and then if not, we'll try it another way. But I'll copy it and I'll paste it, and I'll do Command V, and I'll just backspace here and hit my tab key. And it didn't work. Let's try buddy, hit tab. There we go. I don't know if I'm having some kind of issue here. Let me just save it. Maybe it's having an issue with being saved. Seems to be running slow. Where I'm recording this, I'm away from my Wi-Fi, so I'm a little further away, so it may be a little bit slower here. And now we'll go back. Inside body, we have H1, so we could do H1 tab. Now inside here, it's going to say Spongebob. So it says random Spongebob character, and that's our headline. And then next we're going to have a paragraph. and I'll just do P tab, and then inside this paragraph, I'll see if I could copy this. I'll copy this line, and it says something like, click button to display a random Spongebob character. And I'll see if I could just copy that and put it inside the P tag. I'll put it in there, and that looked like it copied okay. And I'll hit save, and then I'm going to have a button. So this will be after here. I'll just do button and then tab. See, when I do that tab, it's making the tags for us, and then the button is going to say, it's real tiny there because there's nothing on it, and the button's going to say display image. So we'll put display image on there. That's like the label on the button. Display image, and we could always make it bigger if it's too small, but we'll start with that. And then we need an image. So we're going to go here, and we're going to make a div, and I'll just put div, and I'll hit tab. And then in here, well, actually inside the div tag, the opening div tag, we're going to say space ID equals, and then you could use double quotes or single quotes. I'll just use double because I usually use them. And I'll use pick. So div ID equals pick. Now there's nothing in there right now because we're not going to have anything. And then we're also going to have an H2. So I'll do H2 tab. And then inside here, you could even copy this thing if you want, or let's just go inside here. Inside the opening H2 tag, put a space because you got to separate it from the H2. And I'll just put ID equals name. Those are just names we're giving them. And we're going to call that the name is going to be below, and this is going to be where the pick is. Now we don't see them yet because there's nothing here. There's nothing in between these tags. And let's see if we need anything else. Sorry about that beginning thing. I'm not sure what was going on. I think it was more my internet than that not working, because that should work. But we have our H1, our paragraph, our button, our div, and our H2. So I think we have all our HTML done. So that's done. That's our HTML, and it's done. Now, eventually, we're going to have to put a on-click event inside button. But let's worry about putting an image on our page. Now, we could do some CSS with the image, but let's go to JavaScript. And what we'll do, let's make a list of our URLs, because that's where we're getting our images from. So you can even copy one of these, I guess, and see if you click on it, it's gonna go on the image. So let me see if I can kind of get before it. I don't want the number 1, but I'm just gonna copy it just so I get everything. So I'm gonna copy that and see how this works. And I'm gonna make a variable, and I'm gonna say variable, or var is the keyword in JavaScript, and then you give it the name. So the name of the variable is gonna be Spongebob. And you have to put equals, just like you're declaring a variable. And now I'm just gonna paste that. Now, let me backspace here and get rid of that 1 because that came from my PDF. And what I'll do here is I'll put quotes around the whole thing. And I'm going to put I still have to put my tag in here. So we could have wrote this up here, but what we're going to do is inside here, we're going to put less than sign and put image space source space equals and space. So that's kind of writing our tag, and I'm going to put a closing tag here. So let's spread it out and just see what it looks like. Might have to spread it more. That's what it looks like. And you don't need the space here. If that's a problem, you could do this. But notice we have a quote around the entire tag. See, this thing is, remember, that's our thing that actually puts an image on a page. Now, the problem is source needs quotes. So we're going to put a single quote here and then a single quote in here, right after the ping, because that's really the address. So this HTTPS, Homa, WCCC, GitHub, Spongebob, that's the address of the image. And then the entire tag is in quotes, if that makes any sense. And if it doesn't, that's okay. But let's try something. Let's just test it out before we do anything else, before we do all the others. You can even test it out. I'm going to go here and I'm going to try document. And it should kind of help you out here. .get. And we're going to do get element by ID, and it's showing up right here. So I'm going to click on it. It's helping us out here. So it's showing that you have a capital E, capital B, capital I, all that stuff that's confusing. If you start it, it should finish it for you. And we're going to say get element by ID, and what ID are we going to get? And we're going to put in parentheses, we're going to put it in the pick area. We're going to go in the pick area. So we're going to say, we're telling JavaScript to say get element by ID, and the element is this thing, pick, the div ID that's named pick. And we're going to get that, and then what we're going to do here is we're going to do inner HTML, and it's like that, it has to be like that. And I think if you start it, let's see if it finishes it for you. .in, but sometimes it will, inner HTML, and then we're going to say equals, and what it's going to equal is going to be Spongebob. Now again, we're just kind of starting out here, and what should happen is it should go on the page. So that's using JavaScript to put Spongebob on the page. JavaScript is saying, hey, get element pick and put this URL in there. So that's doing it. Now, I'm just testing it out because we're actually going to use a button to do that. But I know it works now. At least I know the URL works. So, you know, by doing that, I know my URL works, and I know that the JavaScript can put it on the page. Now, we're going to do that inside a function. We're going to do all that, but at least I know it works. There it is. And if I want to make them smaller, I can make them smaller. If I want to go up here to button, you could do this. You can put, actually, you could do BR tab, and put 2 line breaks, and that'll kind of move Spongebob down a little bit. It'll be 2 line breaks under here, so he's down a little bit lower. So when you see your characters, they'll be a little easier to see. And we may have to change the sizes, although I think I sized them okay. So we may not need any CSS right now, but this is just very generic. We just put Spongebob on a page using JavaScript. Okay, I'll save that. So that's a good start. That means it's working. And that means I can copy this, and I'll stretch that out. I'll copy this a number of times. We're going to need 5 altogether. Now we could do one at a time. Now this one's going to be Patrick. This one's going to be Squidward. And you got to spell this stuff right. So hopefully they're not, you could put SW if you didn't want to do that. So then we have Sandy. And then we have Krabs, in order of probably they appear on the show. And then Larry. Those are our characters. Now here we'd have to change all these. So that way you can just copy this and paste this here. And copy this. I'm doing Command C and Command V. On Windows, you do Control C and Control V. And I'm not sure if I did the copy. Yeah, I did. So I'm copying this and I'm pasting. And I'm copying this and I'm pasting. And I'm copying this and I'm pasting. So now I have all my URLs. So if I wanted to put Sandy here, I'll put Sandy. And actually, while I'm doing this, now it'll just show up, but one thing I'll recommend doing when you're doing JavaScript is go into your settings, not the settings for the entire CodePen, but this settings, and just go into, I think it's behavior, and auto updating preview. It says, if enabled, the preview panel updates automatically. If disabled, use the run button. I'm going to turn it off so that when we use JavaScript, we could hit the run button to kind of change the JavaScript. We'll need to do that later. So that would only be for this particular pen. That's not for all your settings, and I'll do save and close. So that means I can kind of run this, and it should run a different one each time. It's only going to do Sandy. It's not doing it. I was waiting for it to change, but it's only doing Sandy. But if you wanted to do Patrick, put Patrick in here and then run it. All right, there's Patrick. And if you wanted to make these any smaller, if they seem a little big, you could go here. You could use image, or you can use pick. I think I'm just going to use pick, which would be # pick. And you're just targeting that, and then you're going to do that little curly brace. And I think I'll just do, I think we did height. I forget what I used. Height : and you could do 300 pixels, because that might make it a little bit smaller. And make sure you end that with a semicolon. And let me run it again. Doesn't look any smaller. Let me hit save. It doesn't look smaller. Still not getting smaller. I don't know. I'll deal with that later. It's not important right now. What's important is we get working here with this thing, with our image. So all we're doing is doing something static right now. We're not doing anything dynamic right now. It's actually just doing what HTML would do, except we're using JavaScript to do that, which is, you know, sometimes can be helpful. But I have all these things correct, and you can certainly try them all to make sure they work. But again, we're going to alter this code. There's Larry. I'll hit save, run. There's Larry, and I'm still not getting my my size changing yet. Okay, I looked at the last one, and it didn't use pick, it used image. And let's see if that helps. All right, that helps. It doesn't like using the ID name for some reason. I'm not sure why, unless it's just not picking up the element correctly. Typically that would work, but maybe because it's going through JavaScript, I'm not sure. But let's go here, and I'll just put it at 75. I'll put width 75, and if we have to make it any bigger, that gives us all the room in here we need to see. So we should be good to go now after figuring that out. And we're really going to be dealing with the JavaScript from here on out. So I think what I'll do is I'll take a break here, and what we're going to do is start building our functions to actually make this happen, because everything's ready to go. We have all our code. This won't be that hard to do. But in part 2, we'll actually create our functions to make this happen, except we'll use a random number to do that. So we'll see you back at part 2.